Going to the CNE was a big deal. The CNE was something that it was a, I mean, its long history is as a fair, as an annual fair, and people would go and show off their animals, and people would go and show off the farm equipment. But when I went, it was like an expo. And I'm not talking about the particular year, 1967, or going, or it being related to Expo 67. I mean, just going. There was a Better Living building, I believe it was called, and you went there to see all the latest household technology. There was an automobile a pavilion, and you went there to see all the latest cars. And you went to the food pavilion, which I do remember going to. I always remember food. And but at that time, at a time when there wasn't a great range of foods that you had access to, you just didn't. So all of these things were kinds of attractions, but it was a kind of vision in a way, maybe not a vision of the far future, but it was kind of a vision of the future. I know this has to do with the expos. So the CNE was a place you went to see the latest things. It was also a place you went to compete for some people, Ontario-wide, having to do with farmland and things like that. And it was a place to go, especially if you were a kid. It was a place to go to the Midway. And the Midway wasn't even a Midway. It's just that it was called the Midway because, and I happen to know this, that it goes back to the Chicago Exposition of the 1890s, where all the non-standard entertainments were at this point between two parts of the Chicago Exposition. So it was the Midway. Well, they just kept the name, and I remember it was always, oh, I want to go to the Midway. And you'd go on the rides, you'd play the games, and that was it. So you remember it because it was so unusual to do those things. In my head, I remember I could actually draw a picture of, like, I went in and I'm looking at this, and on the left-hand side was the contortionist. And the contortionist indeed climbed into a box. I don't remember whether her head and feet stuck out, but I think something stuck out, right? And then this other guy got up and shoved a bunch of swords in, and we're all going like this. And then we had to pay our 25 cents to go up and find out that she had wrapped herself carefully around, and all the things where he shoved in the swords just missed her. And she was just fine. But that wasn't all. I also remember when I'm facing it, to her right was, and I may have this in long order. I know there were more people than this, but I remember a man who had the largest mouth, so claimed the largest mouth in the world, and he could put 12 golf balls into his cheeks. This was a thing, and he did that for us for our 25 cents. And then next to him was a monkey-faced boy. I don't know what he was actually called, but I do remember that there was something wrong, something different about his skin, so that he was on display, basically. That was horrifying. And then there were others that I don't remember. And then there was a half woman. There was only half of her was there. Only the top half of her was there. So as advertised, you were actually seeing a woman who only had a torso. She had no bottom half. In fact, I remember quite clearly what we were seeing was a black light trick, where you saw the top half of the person and then she disappeared under black light. So it was a complete fake, and I knew it was a complete fake, and I remember being rather disrespectful of the fact that it was fake. Obviously, I wasn't going to be disrespectful of the other things, they were real to me, but not that. And then at the extreme right, so on the extreme left is the contortionist that you had to pay extra to see, and on the extreme right was the fortune teller that you had to pay extra to see. And you actually had to pay, I'm assuming, like 2 bits to go in. and because everything was 25 cents more, and you had to line up to do that. So you could watch all the other people, and then you could go in and stick around and do that. And I was encouraging my friend to go in, not the friend I still know, the one I don't still know. I don't think there's any relationship there. And he went in, and I remember that when he came out, I was actually, for no reason I can think of, encouraging him to go back in and do it again and see whether he got a different fortune told. I have no idea why I was doing that. And I remember the fortune teller became quite upset with me. They're not unrelated, even for Expo 67 and 70, which will get to, because there is this sense of it being another reality. Mm-hmm. Reality is maybe too strong a word, but it's something like that. I go to the Canadian National Exhibition, and when I walk through there, I am no longer on planet Earth. I'm certainly not in Lowville, and I'm not even in Milton. I am at this place where I'm going to see things that are quite different, and my brain becomes attuned to that. I think. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the authority, except by virtue of the fact that I experienced it along with millions of other people. It was a strange place, and you went for the strangeness. Well, what's strange about it? Well, if it's a vision of the future, that's strange. But a vision of exotica of any kind is also strange. It was certainly it was escapist. The whole thing is escapist. Going on the rides was escapist. It made you think that that you could do things with your body that you couldn't do. I mean, I may have been scared out of my wits going on the centrifugal force rides, which appeared to be a specialty of mine. I don't know, but I'd go on these rides and I would think that I was floating in the air, in both cases, and I was floating in the air, briefly, and screaming while screaming. So I don't know if that's some common ground that relates those two, but they certainly were always associated. I was trying to think through what I remember, and I hope you won't be too disappointed in me, Sanja, but the vividness with which I remember this sideshow just astonishes me. Maybe it's a lie, but I don't see how. I mean, how would I even remember something different, right? I suppose I might have seen something on television that would invade that memory. But Expo 67 and Expo 70 were overwhelming and impressive, but I always feel like I was at a distance. There was no midway. I wasn't taking a centrifugal force ride. I didn't have a fortune teller yelling at me. I was being impressed by design and by architecture. And I don't remember that there were things that were visceral. I'm sure there was a monorail. I honestly don't remember. That doesn't mean I didn't take it and was impressed by it. It's just not a significant memory to me. I know that I would see people performing, and I know that I would go through and read the displays and look at the displays, and I would. Admire isn't the word. I would be impressed by the architecture, because it was all architecture on purpose. It was all architecture that I had never conceived of before. You weren't. That was the point. That you're going, oh my God, that building can be that shape, And I think it's a very important question, because I don't have a memory of touching things at Expo 67 or Expo 70. I don't have a memory of being surrounded by something. There's an exception to that. There was a building at Expo 67, and the book you brought reminded me of it. That was a 360-degree film. Well, nobody had ever seen one of those, or I hadn't seen one of those. I guess there were such things. There were panoramas in the 19th century. But this was a pretty amazing thing. I remember it, and I remember that, the hockey player would be coming toward you here, and then they'd be going away from you here, and you'd be ducking, and and it was great. So I do remember a visceral response to that. I really don't have a clear memory of it, but I know there was something called the labyrinth, and you walked into it and you walked through it. I have absolutely no memory of what happened inside, but I do remember that for years afterwards, I had a record album that was, I guess, the sound and the music that came from that. I only just remembered this. So it must have impressed me a great deal. I went out and bought the record, and I didn't have many records. And so I don't even remember what it was about, but I remember that it impressed me greatly. You ask about things that are sensory, or visual that happened, or that involve touch, and it's not touch, but I certainly remember the space. When you went into the USSR pavilion, and not in any way that this is true, but I have this vague memory that it was vast. Maybe it was just the biggest space I'd ever been in that was end to end, because I hadn't traveled anywhere. What would I have seen that was that big? Nothing. And the American pavilion, I remember, because when you were inside, you could see all around you, and it was a globe. And you could see out from anywhere. So I don't even remember what I was standing on, And then, so it was very impressive. Both of these were very impressive for different reasons. And I know that there were other pavilions that were impressive, but they're kind of gone.